find the agenda. So the agenda is not in front of me. Rats. Give me a second here. Just let me know when we're ready to roll, Rob.
We're ready to roll.
Okay. It is 12:03, and we're going to call to order the March 14th, 2022 meeting of the Vermont Community Broadband Board. We have in attendance from the board, Laura Sevilla, Holly Groschner, myself. Brian Otley is absent, and so far Dan has not joined, but is expected to join. Staff, we have Christine, Rob, Stan, and Alyssa. So I got everybody. And if there's nobody else from staff, we'll just check in on the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda from board members or staff?
No changes.
Okay.
Patty?
Yes, Laura.
I have a question, and I don't know where to put it in, just about financials and kind of how often we would review those. I don't know if that's under Christine. I would just ask that under Christine when we have staff.
Yeah,
updates.
I've actually been working on that with, I think we finally got things straightened out about the middle of February. But as I committed to the board, I would come in March, which I will do at the next meeting, with a proposed budget. So with that proposed budget, I'll also present the proposed reporting format as well.
Great.
It took a while. It didn't come out exactly the way I wanted it, but you know, I think it's workable.
Laura, are you suggesting we do regular updates of the budget maybe once a month or once every quarter?
Well, so under so for additional agenda items today, it was just a question of, I would like to just have us have a discussion about how often we might like to have some sort of update on financials, if it's quarterly or monthly or what the case might be.
Okay, let's add that to the agenda, and let's.
Well, I was going to suggest why don't we make that part of the agenda item for next meeting, which includes a review of the financials. So that.
Yeah, but I think Christine, what we should talk about is just really briefly if we want to do it monthly, if we want to do it every other month. I would not want to. We don't need to get into it right now, but let's add this to the agenda for a 5-minute check-in.
Okay.
And I would propose doing this. Let's do it right after staff updates.
Or it sounds like it could be part of Christine's update.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, what I'm going to do is propose that we amend the agenda and actually have a budget update line right after staff updates. Okay, just so we make sure we get to it.
Thanks, Patty.
Awesome, thank you, Laura. Any other changes to the agenda? But I'm going to move that, and I see Dan has joined us. Hello, Dan. So I'm going to move we approve the agenda. In a second.
Second.
Awesome. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, first item on our agenda is approval of the February 28th, 2022 VCBB minutes. I'll put a motion on the floor that we approve the minutes for February 28th. Is there a second?
Second.
That.
Okay, we got a couple seconds. I'll pick Holly. Any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none, but all those in favor of the minutes as presented, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes passed as presented in our packet. Item 3 on our agenda is recommendation purchase of materials via the pre-construction grant program. Christine, I'll turn that over to you.
Sure. So we've spent some time, a couple meetings on this with the administration, specifically Guidehouse and the finance and management. And as you see, this is in your board packet, by the way, the pre-purchasing recommendation. We look at, we discussed this at the prior meeting with the board. The board had concerns about what liability we would be taking on board for the materials. So ultimately, what we have come up with is a recommendation that we enable pre-purchasing as part of the pre-construction grant. We're kind of in this bind where if we don't purchase the material, we are likely to not make our schedules, because there's a number of material with lead times in that approach a year. Now, we did get some relief on that from the change in Treasury rules, which that change in Treasury rules, which we're making a recommendation you'll see later on, the outside plant requirements. We are able to justify purchasing foreign manufactured materials as long as we can show that we made a reasonable decision and a reasonable attempt to get domestic material. But if it's going to impact our construction schedules, the Treasury recognizes that that's a problem nationwide.
Christine,
So
I think that's going to be a much larger discussion. Maybe we should wait till we discuss that.
Yep. No, I'm just saying that's, but I'm just saying, I don't want to discuss that now. That's what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that is part of how we kind of work through this. And so what we're recommending is that we allow staff to make a line item by line item decision based on the justification to allow the CUDs individually to pre-purchase specific line sizes of materials, and we allow staff to make a line item by line item decision based on the justification to allow the CUDs individually to pre-purchase specific line sizes of materials and quantity based on the need, because ultimately, we're going to have to defend that decision when it comes to any grant reviews that are done by the Treasury. But in our discussions with Guidehouse and finance and management, it seems like we're in a good solid place here. So Rob, why don't you pick it up from here? That's kind of my top level overview.
All right.
What did I miss?
Sure. So just as background, bringing everybody up to date, this all started when we were looking at the letters of intent and whether that would be enough to give the CUDs access to the materials they need. They determined that it likely would not be enough. We explored other options with Guidehouse, including just a pre-grant agreement, a contingent grant agreement. That seemed to be where it was going to take a lot more work. We looked at Act 71. Stan reviewed Act 71 and found that there could be some challenges within the construction grant program of approving money in advance for materials. We then looked back at the pre-construction program. And in the pre-construction program, while it's not specifically called out, it is called out for other items deemed necessary or eligible by the VCB board. We had substantial discussions with VCUDA on this. They developed a proposal based on these ideas. We did run into one question in terms of if it was going to be thrown into the pre-construction program. Like CV Fiber, for instance, has maxed out their current allotment for pre-construction. So we thought that we had $4 million previously budgeted for special opportunities for collaboration. I think we focus on the special opportunity side of things and realize the budget year is ending in July and move that to the pre-construction program. We would have the available funds distributed would be based on the new mileage recommendation. So the percentages are a little bit different, but that would be open for the purchase of materials upon approval by staff. So a similar situation as we did with Make Ready, they have to get to a certain point before we okay it. And that certain point would be to file for the pre-application status for the construction program. We want them to agree to those conditions. We want them to say that they have a business plan. We want them to be invited for a full application. So there are some checks and balances in here. But
yeah, let me add to that this again intertwines with another agenda item, which is the grant agreements. You know, when we talk about CV fiber, what we learned from finance and management is if we do have to increase the grant amount, then of course that's increasing the grant amount will require board approval. But as long as they're within their existing grant, we'll leave this up to staff. Go ahead, Rob. Keep going.
But yeah, we don't need to worry about that right now. What we are asking for right now is board approval to include the pre-purchase or purchase of materials based on staff accepting that the CUD is in a place to be able to do this as an eligible expense in the pre-construction program. The second part of that would be moving $4 million to the pre-construction program.
And let me also add too that in these negotiations, these CUDs are going, I know this from experience, that you can negotiate delivery contracts with a restocking clause. So around the question of if the material doesn't get used, what happens? Well, that can be negotiated as part of the CUD's negotiation with the vendor, which I have not seen that ever been a problem in the past, restocking. Sometimes there's a charge for it. In this particular case, I don't think there should be.
Well, why don't we open it up to board questions now before we get into any and all of the possibilities.
Okay, I see Holly has her hand up. Holly, you're first.
I know it's a surprise to you that my hand is up. So I'm in favor of many aspects of this proposal, but I have a small tweak that I think will help us in our straight-faced response to questions about the integrity of our tracking and our resource management. So this is my little variation on this theme. Instead of authorizing this process under 8085B, which requires the board's discretion for the reasonable purchase of other things in pre-construction, this being, some kind of outside pre-construction, so I'm a little bit concerned about it. I would ask the board to look at 8087 subsection 3, a section that is specifically authorizing the board to do centralized resources, including entering into contracts for goods on behalf of the CUDs. And it seems to me that this is the only hiccup in the proposed plan, that the CUDs are being pre-authorized to purchase goods on a program that has not been authorized, a construction program. Given, I understand that there'll be bells and whistles in place, but if it was the VCBB that actually made the order at the request of the CUD, title to that fiber or those piece parts would remain in the name of the VCBB, and therefore if something happened and it didn't work out, we could reallocate that resource, whether it's fiber or equipment, to another CUD. I'm a little concerned about the idea that if something goes awry, the CUD has title and we have to wait for it to revert to the state. I don't even know what the process for that would even be. So this way, the VCBB, the staff still authorizes it. If it requires an expansion of the resource, I like the idea of tapping the 4 million. That's great. That comes before the board. The staff still approves it the CUD provides a space for the storage of the equipment, but the title, the actual purchase order is made in the name of the VCBB, a contract under section 8087.3. And when we approve the CUD's construction grant, we similarly release title to the equipment or fiber that they're going to need. It's, to me, pretty sweet in terms of its simplicity. That's my suggestion as an augmentation of the staff plan.
Okay, other board members want to jump in. Rob, before we go to you, I just want to check in with other board members first.
Yeah, I'm interested in that and interested in staff reactions to that, to Holly's proposal.
You know what, but you know, I won't speak for Rob or the rest of the staff at this point because we haven't talked it through, but whatever we can do to make this happen, we will do, you know, and I do think, you know, I do think both, there are arguments for both sides, and Holly makes a pretty eloquent argument of why the staff should do it. So, but board, Rob, why don't you weigh in at this point, since the, and feel free to contradict anything I said.
Yeah, it's challenging because I also agree that doing this centralized has a lot of benefits. My concern are more state requirements, state procurement process, the addition of having to do an extra grant agreement for every single CUD. The fact that the CUDs have already gone through a procurement process and would be able to act on this sooner. In terms of the concern about what happens if something falls apart, of taking that back, I think that's something we may be able to address in the grant agreement of what the system is for the return of any of those materials. I just worry there's going to be quite a few delays and more just bureaucratic steps to make it, to be able to do something centralized. I also fear that we as the state may not get the best price. I don't know if that's just based on assumptions or what, but there's also questions of insuring the product if it's owned by the state, and storing the product, of whether we could use have an MOU to store it with a third party or not. That's something that we need to get a lot of clarification on.
And Rob, is it possible that I mean, I know fiber, there's different types of fiber. So a spool of fiber is not the same across every platform. I'm asking that more as a question rather than a statement. The concern I would have is if we bought a bunch of material and the CUDs were wanting to go a different technology or a different route, what happens if we didn't buy the right specs, kind of thing? And I don't know if a spool of fiber is a spool of fiber is a spool of fiber.
I think this is where the outside plant designs come in. Yeah,
and I also say, again, I'll go back to the point that I am pretty darn sure that we could get a restock, you know, a restock agreement with materials.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, Holly, to do a centralized piece. I really kind of like the simplicity of it. I'm just wondering if the practical aspect of it, if it could work or not.
We also do have a proposal we weren't ready to bring today that we've been looking into, of actually contracting for another body to do centralized purchasing and shared resources to try to avoid some of these issues. But that's more of a longer term than this shorter term purchase of the immediate needs for this summer, because that'll take time to set it up. And that is something we did discuss with Guidehouse. We would have to do an RFP process to find who that would be, but that takes us out of the direct procurement game, which may be preferential. But
okay, Dan?
I like the idea. I think it's, we've talked about it before. The discussions we had about standardizing and creating standards were sort of leading towards this. And I think there are a lot of ways, perhaps where Vikuda could be an agent to the state to make some of this happen. But there seems to be so much room to be creative here, and the benefits it creates is worth the pursuit. There is some risk that if I agree with Holly that if something does go sideways or someone changes their mind, how do you pull it back? So if you have central procurement, you can average it across all those ups and downs. Strand is strand, attachment hardware is attachment hardware, snowshoes, as long as there's an agreement on the cable type. I think I'd like to see it pursued.
So Patty, I just thought I could fill in for some of Rob's concerns. I don't see this as additional grants to CUDs, but if you prefer to have the CUDs act as a procurement officer for the VCBB, as long as the title to the stuff ends up in the name of the VCBB, it will help us in the long run and helps the prospectus or the view of what we're doing as not buying horses before we've got carts kind of thing. There's two solutions there. If you want to name the CUDs as procurement groups, there's no question that they would be best suited for that role. It's also the case that because fiber and these materials that you're trying to acquire are so specifically difficult to obtain, I think you can find that there are ways in the state contracting prices that you can go directly to purchase. And I think we've seen that before. You know, it's not like you're going to get 50 bids for every purchase of fiber, or that you can't aggregate the CUD's needs and then purchase that fiber. I think that's been done, right? I have never seen a list of the specific items that would fall into this category of intense competition for materials. And so I do think we need to start getting that documented, like what stuff falls into this kind of specialized world, because we don't want it to migrate out to all kinds of things. I do think that insuring it falls to the CUDs and storing it falls to the CUDs, because I'm actually saying that we procure it, but it goes to their parking lot, wherever they were going to put it, and it's insured by them as it would be anyway. So that shouldn't be an issue. And so I think we don't want to rush to wring our hands here. I think this centralized process has a way for you all on staff to keep track of what's going on.
Okay, Christine, then Alyssa.
Yeah, I was going to talk specifically about the materials list. You know, we've got different lists, but that list is going to be a changing list in terms of specific bolts and specific parts. And I actually think we're more than happy to be transparent about what those lists are. But I don't think that's the level the board should be getting into, is what specifically line item by line item is. It's really like set the policy. You know, of course, we're going to keep the board informed. You know, you could even talk about what those information requirements are. But as far as the specific list goes, that's going to be real specific on a line item by line item basis, and possibly changing, especially with the consideration that we might be able to purchase some of these parts from non-domestic sources. So the first thing is to go make sure we've really explored the domestic sources. We want to see that from the CUDs, or if we do it ourselves, we want to see that and be able to justify that. And then that one alternative might be just to go overseas for procurement. But that said, when you do go overseas, now you have to be careful about who you're purchasing from, because some of these manufacturers, you know, they have multiple manufacturing sites and don't have great quality control.
Hey, Alyssa.
I was just hoping Holly could clarify, you kind of alluded to the fact that this is done or has been done before, and if there's an example so that we have something to follow up on for reference when staff is exploring the process.
So Alyssa, you know, I'm only referring to the fact that there's a standard procurement process in the state, but in certain circumstances, there are roads around that procurement process where the thing to be, the service or goods to be procured are specific, or there's no competition available for those things. And so there are ways in circumstances just like these where a direct purchase can be made, and we don't have to spend time going through a lengthy state purchase process. That's all. If you need specific help and examples, we can pull them up or get building services involved with examples or whatever you need, but
yeah,
that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, we have a meeting set up with BGS this week, but yeah, I wasn't sure if there was an example of another agency that does this of a certain type of material.
I've done it myself.
Okay.
But that's dated, and Stan could meet with the AG's office on examples where multiple bids. I guess it's really Buildings and Grounds that has the best examples, but you know, there are examples where when you have a sole source provider, and certainly when we're looking to do it this way, it must be the case that there are only a handful of providers and only a handful of only a subset of those providers are going to be available for this purchase, I think is what I'm trying to say. Okay.
Yeah, Christine, I would see this as an option for the CUDs, not necessarily a requirement. For those that want to go and do it themselves, purchase on their own behalf or purchase through VCUDA, they could choose those routes, either do it themselves, do it through VCUDA, and then a third spoke of the wheel could be through VCBB. So I would look at it as let's add to the toolbox of things that they can do. So if it's something that you guys can spend a little bit of time researching on capabilities and how we would do it, but I would want to give the CUDs the first right of choosing how they want to do it. If they want to do it themselves, then they go through the 24-month process that you've proposed, where staff is reviewing their business plan and making sure that they look viable. You've got the right checks and balances in terms of your review. If they want to do it themselves, I would see all tools on the table, so to speak, to tackle this issue.
I'm really confused by your comment, Patty. Are you suggesting that we pre-fund CUDs as one of the options?
Yes.
Pre-fund. Okay, I'm directly opposed to that idea.
Okay. If a CUD wants to purchase its own materials,
that's fine with me. I'm talking about where we use VCBB funding. We ought to keep the assets, the materials, in the name of, or in the title holder to it should be the VCBB until we get a construction grant approved to those folks.
Laura and Dan, you agree with that?
Well, I don't know how big the problem is, but if materials are being purchased and they're going to a mature CUD that has other projects going on that are not within the grant profile, if that material is not tracked carefully, appropriately, then it could go.
Yeah.
And so just proper tracking to ensure that sort of thing doesn't happen, I think, is probably an important piece of this. Or when the grant money is given out, then there's a direct tie to these materials were purchased in support of the grant that's already, part of that's already been purchased. To me, it's an accounting function, and we just need to make sure that we have the right mechanisms in place not to lose track of what's already been purchased.
I want to bring up one other issue, and we might be able to solve it easily too, is that so there's delays on some of the fiber. Some of it is coming, some of it will be coming later. It should work out. There's going to be a gap, but there's also fiber that is coming that may arrive before the construction grants come in. It's a bit of a dance here that needs to be paid for. That's one thing that doesn't solve with us taking over the procurement side of things. I do have concerns on just how long things are going to take with the state to do this procurement. We would have to do our own process versus working off of the CUDs that have a process that's ongoing. I just think there's going to be a lot to go through, and I don't think we can certainly try to seek an exemption for a sole source contract, but with how we're not talking about 50,000. We're not talking about 100,000. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in purchases that may be challenging to. We can try, but I'm just concerned that we're gonna run into a lot of bumps here.
Rob, you're making my case for me. Hundreds of $1,000s worth of assets prepaid before the construction approvals are ready. I'm wondering why, when the fiber shows up and needs to be paid for, why it isn't best that we pay for it and transfer title into the name of the VCBB until the grant is ready to go.
Well, that actually could be another option. If we wanted to work off of we'd have to check with Guidehouse. We may be able to pay for that fiber that was purchased with those letters of credit. Then the CUD may be able to recycle the letter of credit as needed. But it's a possibility. We'd have to check with the providers of how it would work, but it's.
If you have a letter of credit, it's my understanding that you can, you can transfer that letter of credit and pay it off immediately. Like, there's very few people who are going to say, no, you can't pay off your letter of credit, right?
It was specific for the purchase of fiber, but I'm assuming they would be willing to open it to fiber and other materials. But these are all things to find out. But that, I guess, could be another solution.
Well, I'm trying to solve your problem with regard to the arriving fiber. That's all. I'm just trying to solve a problem.
It would seem that the state owning these assets for this interim period would be the best solution, and it's probably the best positioned to manage the materials. Number one, the procurement, the materials, the insurance, because I think by default, and I don't know this, but there's an insurance policy that covers, but if not, then we could get a policy. And I don't know if I'm in support of it if the logistics can be worked out. And it seems like the staff could work a little deeper on this one to figure out what those might look like.
Yeah. I'm gonna jump in here and say, I think we're approaching a workable policy here. I do like the idea that we could transfer the assets. The CUDs could order the material, and we transfer the assets. And this is going to require really close communication between the VCBB and the CUDs anyhow, no matter how we do it, because we want to make sure that we've followed all the guidelines from the Treasury. So I like where this is going. So just
Christine, the other thing is if they hold a letter of credit and they've ordered fiber and they can pay for that letter of credit on whatever the terms are, they don't need us, so they can go ahead.
So do we want to hear what Vakuda has to say? And I think Laura's trying to say something first, though.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in here. I would like to, rather than make a final decision, I'd like to get some input on this from the CUDs and Vakuda, just to see if we're trying to solve a problem that's just going to make things more complicated for them. I'd like to get some input on this, but before we do that, Laura?
Well, that's exactly why my hand is raised, Madam Chair.
Okay. let's let's get you on the line if you're available. And my thinking is not to solve this today or make any decisions today, but have Vikuda talk to the CUDs about this option, and let's take it up for action at the next board meeting. Will?
Thank you, Patty. I raised my hand mostly in order to voice support for the idea that the VCBB could retain ownership of assets until grant funding is awarded to CUDs. This would be in line with our proposal. Our priority is to find a way to pre-purchase new materials and to make payments on materials once they arrive. The way we see it, because of the reversion of assets to the state, effectively these materials would be the property of the VCBB until the CUD network is fully granted in any case. So we are very open to the idea that the VCBB holds title on these materials, provided that there's a mechanism by which we can promptly access funding in order to pre-purchase and pay for materials. So we would be very much in support of such a policy as this, provided that we're able to act upon it quickly and use it in a variety of circumstances.
Will, does it make sense to have some more discussion on this at the next meeting? So basically, this is a concept we're hearing for the first time now, and then come back and take action at the next meeting versus today.
We did issue a proposal in the hopes that a decision would be made, but we are at a pretty critical period for the purchase of materials, but I don't know what else we can do in order to influence this to move faster. I would urge the board to try to make a decision today, as that would immediately give us frankly better bargaining power when it comes to purchases that we're making right now, and streamline our process for being able to demonstrate our ability to pay for materials.
So given that this is a brand new suggestion that Holly brought up today versus the proposal that was in the board packet, I just want to give us all time to react to it. And Christine, I would like to have your opinion if you would want to act on this now, or if you want some time to think about staff implications.
Well, why don't let's hear from FX Flynn, see what he has to say, and then we'll give you our thoughts. I lean towards getting this solved quickly as well. I mean, I think we've been talking about it for quite a while. So I think the options we talked about today are workable. So it's really picking the best solution. So I don't see this is a real. I don't think we need to delay it, but I'd love to hear from FX.
FX, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would very much appreciate it if you would move ahead on this concept right away. I mean, I'm the named signature as the head of Vikuda on all of these millions of dollars of purchase orders that Vikuda has placed, that Vikuda is technically on the hook for, not each of the individual CUDs. They've simply guaranteed us that they'll pay us out of their construction grants. So yeah, I'm a little concerned, not nervous. I think this is a good solution. So I would be personally grateful if you would pursue it.
Yeah, let me just summarize what I think the proposal is. The proposal, from what I understand, is that the VCB, the top thing is that the VCB will retain ownership of this material until it gets properly dispositioned and used within the construction grant program. We have the flexibility of allowing the CUDs to make their purchases. But ultimately, if they do, we want to have that ownership transferred to us, or we can use those skills of the CUDs. What I don't one of the things, the reason I say that's important is because what we don't want to do is set ourselves up for having to put together a whole purchasing program at the CUD, at the VCBB level. So I think the idea that we've already got work that's been done with the CUDs in terms of the complying with Administrative Bulletin 3.5 in terms of purchasing, that we don't need to reinvent that wheel. But I think the key is that we take ownership of that material. Have I got that right?
It seems to me that what you're saying, Christine, is that in order for the VCBB to make payment on the material, the CUD would transfer ownership of it to the VCBB and agree to store it and insure it until grant funds are released.
Yes, and that would put ownership on staff to make sure that those processes are in place.
If I may, if the board does decide to use the pre-construction funding as the source by which CUDs can make these purchases and payments, it could be a matter of amending that rule for that materials, payments, and purchases from the pre-construction would be transferred to the property of the VCBB until construction grants are issued.
I'm a little concerned about creating it as pre-construction grants. I really think that this is our authority to do this under 8087.3, and staff has already astutely identified a pot of money, the $4 million, to make this possible. So rather than going back and amending everybody's grant, I think this is a much more, a bit more elegant.
Can I attempt to try to simplify to a proposal right now to see if we could find agreement at least on this part? And that proposal would be that the VCBB staff is authorized to work through the logistics of paying directly for the fiber that has been pre-purchased by Vacuda, or there was a second transaction with NEK with a different bank. By doing that, it opens up the possibility of that letter of credit being used to purchase other materials. If that's something we can do immediately today while we look into the other things, it solves some of the initial problem, and it could solve the whole problem depending on what those providers of the letter of credit say.
All right, Krista has her hand up. I would like to hear from Krista.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for addressing this. It's definitely an important issue for us. I just wanted to talk through, I think, what I'm understanding and verify some of the pieces. So in terms of, I think this is an important issue from two standpoints. One is the fiber that's ordered and imminently going to arrive. And then the second is the additional materials that have long lead times. What we've found from our RFPs are that the key items are anchors, which have 20-week lead times. There's one 21-inch bolt that has a crazy lead time, and like terminals have 32-week lead times. There are sort of a set of big items that have these longer lead times. Network equipment is another one of them. If we just look at it for a second from the fiber perspective, then I think that we had approximately $7 million in fiber. And so we're talking about 4 million. I think that that's fine because the 4 million, because the fiber is due to ship between April 1st, we still have a shipment due April 1st, and what looks like October-ish now. And so there certainly should be, we sure as heck will be approved to be able to get into construction grant funds and not worry about it. But I'm just recognizing that there's a portion, we should take a look at the portion of fiber that's going to happen in the time frame that's going to be necessary for folks. And people are going to be at different stages of the game in terms of their applications for the construction grant and, you know, the ability to get it done, et cetera. So then that brings us to the second piece. If either enough of the fiber is coming in a short enough period of time that we are eating up the 4 million, I do think that we can get some kind of delays if we need to give us more flexibility there. So with the second piece and ordering the parts, is it the case for, I guess, for both the fiber and the parts, that effectively we've issued the purchase order, it would get shipped to us. In order to make the payment for the goods, we would exchange payment from the VCBB to ourselves for the title of those goods. Is that what I'm understanding?
In my mind, and this is subject to Stan's opinion and process, yes, there would be a bill of sale in exchange for a release of VCBB funds. And so we'd actually have something in exchange for the funds that were delivered. Can I ask Krista a couple clarifying questions, Madam Chair?
Absolutely, go ahead.
So $7 million in fiber, is that just for NEK?
No, ours is about 3.5.
Okay. And can you explain the terms of your letter of credit? When is payment due?
So our letter of credit was for the full amount, which helped. We needed to get to 75%. So we were able to get to 100%, and the Vacuta purchase was able to get to 50%, which met the needs of the vendor. Our letter of credit is definitely very specific to fiber. Like there was the idea, it is possible that we may be able to turn that letter of credit into something else, but the terms of the agreement are, for the letter of credit, are full, full title, full liens against, not title, but full liens against all of the fiber. And until we actually have the fiber in hand, they actually have a lien against other assets. But as soon as the location of the fiber has been determined, then that's where it sits. My concern about transferring that letter of credit was that they very specifically gave it to us on the basis that fiber was that it was one item, right? They could take this and sell it on the market, and they saw it as being very liquid given the market and where they saw it. And they had a much different view of like a bunch of different terminals and different size lengths of things, and just like all of the stuff that goes around the material. In addition to that, like how,
So Krista,
yes.
I'm gonna make this easier for all of us. So does the letter of credit have to be paid off upon delivery of the fiber?
I'm sorry, the letter of credit terms, the letter of credit only gets activated, and we don't pay anything on the letter of credit unless we have to use it. And we only have to use it if we don't pay NRTC within, well, for us, it's 45 days. Probably it's 30 days.
So we're fine here because your letter of credit issuer, the bank, would, as soon as we have the VCBB funds to pay off the fiber, they would release their lien.
They would release their lien. Yes, that's exactly, no, we're absolutely fine from that perspective.
Okay, I just wanted to make it clear that's all good. Now, what happens from there on in is another story, but for purposes of getting our immediate, what we've got is a timing issue. And so hopefully we can create this mechanism to address our timing issue without creating another tracking problem. But anyway, So,
Yeah, let me
yeah.
just, let me highlight what you just
Can I-
said here, because I want to make sure everybody remembers what we're talking about here. We're not talking about transferring letter of credit. We're talking about VCBB paying for the material upon its arrival so that it frees up your letter of credit for others. But we're talking about, right now, we're talking about specifically what to do with the existing orders. You know, we haven't yet, these grants that exist for the first set of purchases. You know, the next set of purchases can be done the same way, but there may be other options.
So Christine, I would just suggest that if you're going to put the title in the name of the VCBB, your letter of credit is secured by that fiber. So now you have fiber that's actually got a lien on it. And so what I think our right idea is here is to have the letter of credit has to have either a different security.
But couldn't we purchase that material? Essentially, what we buy that material for the CUD, take it completely off their books so that that's no longer necessary. Doesn't need to be secured anymore.
You have a thing, the fiber, and the bank has a lien on that fiber. It's as though you bought the car with a lien on it. You have to have the bank release that lien.
Okay, Krista wants to say something.
It's going to effectively extinguish the line of credit. Like, I think that the way that you do it is that you extinguish the line of credit. That may give you then room with that same bank, not necessarily ours, but maybe I'll try and work magic, but you know, it may give you the ability to get another line of credit, but I don't think that you're not going to free up a letter of credit, and that is not going to be then available for the purchasing of materials. So I will say that I do agree that we need to address the fiber issue and have this, because we don't want to be actually using our letter of credit and paying interest on something that doesn't make sense. But I will also say, particularly for some other CUDs, and because I shouldn't be too optimistic about my own application, probably, there is a serious concern about the purchase of the other materials that need to be put in place. At least some of these longer lead times, like the anchors and the terminals and the network equipment. And so I really hope that you would consider making those funds available for that first round. And then I would think that once one paid it back, that it would replenish the $4 million, right? Like if I put in a construction grant application in 2 weeks and it gets approved, and then I can use those funds, then I can pay back whatever might or might not get used before that time, and then it could get reused out of that 4 million amount. Okay. But I'm concerned about other materials other than fiber. I just want to say it's really important that we get some of these long lead time items on order.
I really appreciate the fact that you named them, Krista. So thank you. And it seems to me that if this process works for fiber, it might work for other things as well, in terms of VCBB money and, you know, just exchange VCB money for title, so we have the asset until you have the grant.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I would just encourage us, if we're doing the policy, to make it flexible to that, and not limit it just to fiber.
So I think Will has his hand up again.
Okay, go ahead, Will.
Thank you, Patty. Just to briefly update on where Vicuta's position stands in relation to NEKs. We do have letters of credit sourced from 2 statewide institutions, which, if we are not able to make our payments to our fiber supplier within 30 days of that fiber's arrival, we will have to start drawing down upon, which is not ideal for a number of reasons. I would just like to stress that, this whole operation was conceived as a way to leverage the VCBB's funding in advance of that funding being available. What I have tried to get across in our proposal and what was approved by the CUD Association is a way to try to leverage your funding in a much faster and more streamlined manner to facilitate payments and further purchases. So I would just stress that that's the idea of what we're getting at here. The idea of expanding our letters of credit to cover other materials is really not our ideal. We would much prefer a situation in which the VCBB retains ownership if it just facilitates easier purchasing on behalf of CUDs so that they can get their bill of materials as it develops and make those purchases. We're fine with making them within the outside plant requirements and with those assets being retained by the VCBB until construction grant funding is awarded. I would just stress that we are looking for a solution that allows us to do that in an efficient manner.
Can I put Stan on the spot? Stan?
I'm here, yes.
Based on your read of Act 71, is there anything that would prevent us from using the pre-construction program to do these purchases, to extending the grants for this?
Well, if the board approved the use of them, no, but that's the hook, that the board must approve them.
Okay.
What I would suggest we do is that we take action on this concept, and Christine, you and staff put the devil's always in the detail, but put the details around it to make it so. I'm going to make a motion that we authorize VCBB staff to proceed with making purchases of equipment and goods. And reading goods from the language that Holly cited, basically the purchase of goods on behalf of CUDs. I want to put this in a generic thing that we can take action on, and then you guys have to figure out the details. VCBB staff go figure out the details. Go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say that like as the longer term option, I think that does address it. There still is the shorter time, and if we were to start the process today, it would probably be at least 2 months before we could sign a contract to purchase materials. So there's another 8 weeks to the Holly.
Rob, I don't think that's what it's saying. It's not telling us how to do it. We can pre-purchase goods. I like where Patty's going because it gives us the flexibility.
Even via the grant programs?
So, hold on, time out.
Go ahead, Patty.
I'm going to move that under section 87, paragraph 3, that we authorize VCBB staff to put a program together to purchase goods on behalf of the CUDs. I'm going to try to keep this as wide open as I can.
And Rob, that gives us the flexibility that we're looking for. We could have the CUDs take the action, but we're still in the end going to, pay for those goods, and we'll have those assets on our books. You follow?
Right.
So that's not the pre-construction grant program, the language that we're citing, though. So how are we doing that?
We're not handcuffing you here to pre-construction or construction grants right now.
And,
so it can be either.
Hold on. Time out, Holly.
Patty, I just want to urge Rob to understand that he doesn't have to then go back and amend all the grants in order to fit this in. But Patty, to your motion, I'm kindly asking whether you would suggest that they purchase materials titled to the VCBB.
Yes. So that way we maintain ownership of the state, and that's the goal of this provision.
I'll second for discussion, which we're well into.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? All right, let's take action. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Dan, were you and I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes. It was a delay.
Sorry.
Okay, any opposed? We all voted aye, so hopefully there's no opposed. Okay, motion carries. So you have flexibility, Christine, to put this together, the details, but you've got the concept approved.
Yep, thank you. Thank you so much. We will move forward with this, and I think it meets our needs. Good discussion. Nice job.
Will, was that an old hand or a new hand? Because do you need clarification? Oh, old hand.
All good. Thank you. My apologies.
Right, and you guys can.
Yeah, we'll create the
staff will
clarification.
shape this to make it fit the needs of the CUDs.
Yep, yep.
Okay, excellent. All right, is there anything else on purchase of materials? All right, hearing nothing, let's move to recommended policy change, item 4.
Yeah, I'm going to have, Rob, why don't you take this one?
Sure, I'm just going to pull it up again. My mind is still spinning here. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to share my screen just because then we're all looking at a document, which might be helpful. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so there's two major developments that we've come across in the past week that could be beneficial. After speaking with finance and management and Guidehouse and reviewing the new language in the final Treasury guidelines, it's strict when it comes to domestic procurement, but it's not as ironclad of a ban as we initially expected and what was the assumption. So the way it works is that it's domestic purchase as appropriate and to the extent consistent with law, to the greatest extent practical. In discussions with Guidehouse, if the price is different, that wouldn't be allowed. We still would have to go domestic. But if it wouldn't allow us to accomplish our goal and the project in the times allowed by ARPA or the Vermont construction season, that would fall into there being an exemption to being where we could purchase, if we've exhausted other possibilities, materials that are not domestically produced. The entire process would have to be documented. We've laid that out in here. You can see in the document that we need a detailed narrative explaining the full procurement process for seeking the materials, the time allowed, what you were asking for, etc., the results, showing how there is not a domestic provider that can achieve that in the period of time. So for instance, if there's a gap and you need fiber for a project starting in 3 months and no other provider can provide that, that could be something that would be eligible for an exemption. You're going to need to detail the impact on the project if the materials cannot be procured, and you will need to provide that to us. But it does provide more flexibility than we initially thought, which was that there's no way to get an exemption. I should be clear that the revision doesn't negate the prohibition on purchase of materials from specific Chinese companies or the new state prohibition on purchasing anything from Russia. So this would require a change in the RFP and in the outside plant designs to clarify this and to clarify the process that's required for seeking such an exemption. So that is the first item. There's a second item we can get. Actually, okay, the first one. Sorry, okay. Actually, I skipped to the second one. I apologize. So why don't we deal with that one first? Item 2, proposal.
All right. Any questions or comments?
My only question is, so today the CUDs may be doing their own procurement, but you would be involved at the point that they aren't meeting the domestic standard. Is that correct? Is that how it works?
Yeah, if they have to seek an exemption, they will have to provide us with the documentation. We will have to grant the exemption to be able to purchase from a non-domestic provider.
And the internal process for that would be what?
They would send us a memo, staff would review it. If we have any questions, we would ask Guidehouse and Finance and Management, and we would try to turn it around as quick as possible.
So if you're the grant administrator, Rob, are you also required to make the decision on the exceptions to the policy? Or does that go to Christine or to Stan?
I think it would be just like everything with us, a group effort, but the final decision would come down to Christine. I'm sure Stan would have input. I'm sure we have our bi-weekly meeting with Guidehouse and Finance and Management. They would have input because we don't want to, no one wants to mess this up. That's what it comes down to.
And so let me clarify why I'm asking. I just think if we don't make it clear that there's going to be multiple eyes on it, it puts a tremendous amount of burden on the grant administrator. So yeah, I think as a board, we would be looking to Christine to ensure that it was a very transparent process.
Yeah. And we could report that back to the VCBB if you wanted to know that information, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily in the weeds that you want to, where you need to go, but.
I don't think we need to be in those weeds. Okay, next item.
Oh, we need a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Nice, have it. Let me just do anybody opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Motion approved.
Perfect. All right, let me go back to the second one. The second one is just regarding the, let me make sure. Let me go back up here. So the second one is back to the pre-construction grants and what it takes for, what types of approval is necessary. What we've been, oops, I'm on the wrong one. I apologize here. Here we are. So we wanted to make clear and make this as a policy that if it's an increase in the total amount of the grant, it requires board approval and a formal grant agreement. If it's a change to the allocation for an individual item already included in the scope and budget that has previously been approved or is itemized in the program, it does not require board or staff approval or individual amendments, but they must be noted in the monthly grant reports. And then this last one at this point, I guess, is not, this was about the purchasing of materials and everything. So it's mainly saying that we need a grant agreement only if it is changing the total amount of the grant. The rest is reported back to us.
Yeah, so the motion to approve this one would be the first two bullets. And we will discard the third bullet.
Yeah, and this will also go away what is highlighted right now at this point until we figure this out. So it's just streamlining what needs to come to the board, what needs to come to the staff, and the number of grant agreements. Because we've had requests for, oh, I'm going to spend $14,000 more on this $500,000 item. Do I need an amendment for this? And our feeling is no.
Holly.
So I think I've answered my own question just by looking at the documentation. You're saying that not that there's been a reallocation within the items authorized under section 8085, I think it is, but for pre-construction grants, but rather in the package that's the board, the grant application, the amount of funding is shifting from category to category among those approved categories.
I was actually saying both, but we can address them separately. There's specific line items we called out, and then many of the grants have a contingency that lists other items that were itemized in Act 71 as eligible under pre-construction. And that's what this list is below.
So this is such a technical thing that I'm asking my fellow board members, and Stan, maybe you want to help us out here, but if somebody's asked for, let's say that these grants were for Oreo cookies and milk, and the law said you could get grants for milk and cookies and fruit, and somebody comes by later and says, you know, I've decided I want some fruit. And we made a decisions about cookies and milk. Have we appropriately or inappropriately delegated our authority to make decisions within that, under that statute, if we are allowing staff to include a new category.
I don't think that's what we're asking for here, Holly. We're saying if they're asking for cookies and milk, and the cookies cost $5 and the milk costs $4. Well, all of a sudden we're going to say, oh, wait a minute, the cookies are going to cost $6, but I'm going to reduce my cost for milk. You follow?
Christine, just to clarify.
That's not what Rob's saying, though.
No, Christine, in the grant agreements, as you've read, there's a contingency section that lists, in many cases, some form or another, this list below of items that can be approved if you pre-approved by the staff within that amount. I just want to make clear that I'm just trying to get clarity for our grantees and for us that if it's been itemized in their proposal, or if it was in that list of conditional things that staff can approve, that we can go forward with that without coming back for an agenda.
Yeah, but in other words, we've already been approved for the cookies, milk, and fruit. They just haven't brought the fruit yet.
Well, no, what Rob's saying is we approved milk and cookies, but fruit could have been authorized under the grant, and so the staff is now going to be allowed to approve the purchase of fruit as long as it doesn't expand the total amount of the grant.
Yep, agreed.
Sorry for the silly analogy.
No, that's a good one.
Okay, go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, so let's get out of the analogy land. So we have budget items, line items that have been approved, and are we simply asking to be able to change the amounts of approved budget items, or are we adding for the ability to add budget, add line items, but just keep the amount the same? If it's the latter, I'd like an example of why that would be necessary. You're muted.
You're on mute.
I'm trying to open up a grant agreement to show how the language is written there, but my computer is having problems.
While you're doing that, maybe I can, I think I just offer my opinion here is that I think this is reasonable because at the time that the CUDs put forward what their plans were, from that point to now, a lot has matured, and alternative routes, configurations of equipment, partnerships, all kinds of things I'm sure have come to the table, and that a degree of compromise, I guess, where that the staff could exercise, as long as it stays within the, I know you're having troubles with your mute there, as long as it stays within what was already pre-approved or granted, I think that's where we need to stay, and that the staff should be able to work within those guardrails. So if they have less fiber and more electronics, or they found a partnership that offers a trading opportunity and they can move their money around and then perhaps build more in another area, I think that's what we're talking about here. Be able to work within those guardrails. So if they have less fiber and more electronics, or they found a partnership that offers a trading opportunity and they can move their money around and then perhaps build more in another area, I think that's what we're talking about here, and it seems very reasonable, in my opinion, to give that latitude to the staff.
All right, Laura, then Holly.
Yeah, I am definitely amenable and support giving latitude to the staff to move, amounts between budgeted items. I think I just need a little more on adding new items. And so, Dan, in the examples that you were just giving, was there one that you would consider to be an adding new item?
No, when I look at that list, sorry, I have it on my screen here. When I look at that list, I think it would all fit within what's there unless someone wants to educate me on that. So I think the term new might be the CUD didn't put forward a request for money in a certain bucket, but now they find it's necessary and they would like to shift money into that bucket, but the buckets are already predefined, and I think it would fall within those guardrails. Rob, can you shake your head yes or no if I get that right. That's what I would imagine, and I think
Right.
is reasonable.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly. I'm just going to give what's already in most of the grant agreements is this contingency language that says that it says that the staff can approve this for these items that are outside of everything that was previously itemized.
Yeah.
So we just want to be able to move within those categories if necessary, rather than coming back. Because that's what it's in most of the grant agreements as drafted. We just wanted to clarify that with both the board and everybody else.
I think it's very reasonable. I don't see microwave on here. I don't see technologies that are, piloting.
I should also note that the make ready work, that's been amended to include all the conditions too. This is just the original grant agreement.
And this seems to allow the fluidity of the way the projects are maturing based on the relationships they may have developed or opportunities that they might have come across as this all has gone forward.
Yeah.
And Rob, are these the particular items? Is there anything on the next page?
Nope. Yes, there are. Sorry. Oops, I just lost it again. Hold on. Sorry. Good call. Yes, there are. As you could see, highlighted now. And the X is referring to everything above that was part of the initial proposal.
Better be careful about memberships.
Mm-hmm.
So Patty, I would move that we adopt the proposal of staff to allow staff to reallocate approved grant funds among the categories expressed in the grant application as approved and those authorized to pre-construction grants under, what is it, section 85?
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, motion is on the table.
What's
Is there
not
any more
included?
discussion?
What is not included in that motion, Holly?
What is not included?
Yeah.
Here, I'm going to, I don't think there's anything that's not included that has been proposed. And that's section 8085 B. That's what the grant application reflects, right, Rob?
I believe so. I'd have to look back to confirm, but I believe so.
Well, otherwise, if you're putting things in that aren't in the pre-construction authorization law, then we have to do a whole different motion about staff not modifying the grant application. So I don't even want to go there.
I'm trying to get to it to pull it up to make
Yeah,
sure that
it's
that's
8085B.
Yeah, I would just go with the, you can put the explicit assumption that it's within 8085B. If it's not, well, then we probably got a problem to deal with them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to put that in your motion, that works.
I did.
Yep, nice job.
Laura, does that answer your question?
I'm not sure it does. I'm thinking.
You know, can I make a comment directly to you, Laura?
Please do. Although I think everyone will hear it.
Oh gosh, if I whisper, is it true? So I'm thinking this is going on. This really just reiterates what Dan has already said. Let's say that you were you submitted your pre-construction grant at a time when your business plan didn't reflect some element, and now you need to modify your business plan. It's going to cost you some change. We really want those business plans to be revised.
Mhm.
So wouldn't we want the staff to say, okay, you're going to have to take some of that money that you plan to spend on another category and put it into that category? If the CUD should be so unwise as to say, you know what, scrap our grant application, we want all of our money to go into legal expense. Our position as a board has been that we will support the CUDs. I'm hopeful that staff would caution against it. And if they had a real question, maybe they'd come back to the board. But by and large, the pre-construction grant money is there to facilitate the program. So whatever that CUD is saying, okay, we found that this is our newly recognized core need. We'd want them to do that.
Yeah, and I'll add too that if, you know, we already said that if the staff refuses, if the staff, you know, rejects a proposal, there is an appeal process to the board. So it's more likely, you know, that we will reject something and the CUDs won't be happy with it. There is an appeal process.
So it puts the onus on staff to be watching where the reallocation of funds go and monitoring that for appropriateness. So
Yep.
if they all load up on legal, I would hope that staff would say, you know, time out, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And I noticed that list is not limited to, and so, you know, if we're looking at things that are not on that list, I would hope that staff is really extra cautious there. And
you've
you know,
got-
I would
you've
like
got
to
me
make
to
sure
hold-
that we're providing as much flexibility for timing between the CUDs and staff as possible to get things done. But also, you know, I do want to make sure pretty much all the time we're setting precedents. So.
And we will report those. You will report those changes to the board. You know, as that way you know you can hold me accountable for that. You know, the point is, so I think through a reporting process, you know, that gives you the ability to say you've done your due diligence.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they go outside of what's already been approved, yes.
It's hard to shut the barn
Itemized.
door, you know? So that's really my concern and around precedents. So I just hope that, again, wanting to provide optimal, you know, I'll support this. I just hope that staff is hearing, please be cognizant of precedents that you're setting.
Right, and I'll just add my 2 cents. It makes, in my opinion, I'm going to vote yes for this because I don't want to get into micromanaging the details. And we had a long discussion about marketing dollars. Some of us thought the numbers were right. I didn't think they were. I thought they were pretty aggressive. We shouldn't be going there as a board. That should be at the staff level. And it gets us out of the weeds in this, in that respect. All right, any more discussion on this? All right, let's call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next item we have, we've done both the pre-construction grant amendment and domestic procurement. Anything else on that, Rob or Christine?
No, I think we're good. I think we're on to the construction grant review to open up this discussion.
Okay, number 5, construction grant review. First item is proposed checklist to review business plans. You want to tee that up, Christine?
Yep. The staff, we've had some extensive discussion on this. And I'll, you know, Rob, why don't you take this one away as well?
Sure. I'm going to once again share the screen and I'll give a little background. The first bit of background is we have received or are in the process of receiving our first construction grant full application. In the discussions with Fukuda, there seemed to be some clarity missing in terms of what's expected, what we're going to be looking for in the business plan. Staff will be reviewing the business plans, as will our consultant that's doing the fiber optic engineer, CTC. We'll be reviewing it, and we wanted to come up with some kind of checklist to go through of what we're looking for and what types of questions we're going to ask. So we thought this would be a good experiment to go through with the board to see if there's things we're missing, and for the CUDs to know and understand, because I feel like some CUDs may be getting lost in the details, some may not be paying enough attention to the details. So trying to find the middle ground here on this, and we may do this for other items. After we go through this, we can talk in general about the process and the expectation for review. But let's just start on the compliant business plan. So, and this is all spelled out from what's in the RFP, but in a different format. So first I start with assumptions that we assume it's a living document. Your business plan from 6 months ago might not be the exact business plan for now. We want you to know that we understand it's a living document and that it should be updated, and it will continue to be updated. When you submit your next application, it's going to likely have to be updated based on what you've built and what's changed in the market. We also assume that for most of the CUDs that the business plan and the feasibility study were produced under the Broadband Innovation Grant Program. So, and that if that's all, it requires updating before it's going to be an Act 71 compliant plan. So the initial questions, we just want to confirm whether it was from the innovation grant. Who produced the plan? So what consultants did you use? It says, has it independently been signed off by a financial institution? Your feasibility study required that as part of the Broadband Innovation Grant. If you've taken your business plan also to a banker, we want to know about that too. That gives us an increased confidence. We want to make sure that the business plan's been updated since, as I said, the original business plan is not good enough at this point. There are things missing, things have changed. Some of those were produced prior to COVID. So we want to know when it was last updated and by whom. So then we had a checklist we were going to go through. We wanted to know if it had a universal service plan. We know there's going to be a separate part of the application that's the universal service plan, but it should be summarized. We should know what is this you're planning for? What is the business plan about? And then we just go through different questions, yes or no, concerns with the assumptions or comments, and then list the comments if we have any questions for the applicants. We go through whether there's market analysis, take rate assumptions, cash flow data. It's everything that's spelled out in the RFP. Then we go into the risk section, and this is where things were added from Act 71. And for this, it's like, yeah, yes or no, we want to see if you address it, but we need details. We need how you plan on addressing it. Are you seeking from multiple vendors, for instance? What have you seen out there? These sections are not just going to be a paragraph, but probably be at least a page each. So we have we have confidence you have a full understanding of what the risks are. And this goes into labor needs, supply chain, make-ready work delays, additional expenses. And this last one has created some confusion, and it might not be. I want to throw this to Christine to talk about. Of what are you looking for when it comes to evaluating the risks associated with contract management, safety and housekeeping? How do we prevent that from happening?
Yeah, so since you're the granting, since the CUDs own the grant and they're going to be doing the contracting, ultimately, how are they going to manage their contractors? And that's, managing the contractors, schedule, reporting, and then including addressing safety and housekeeping as part of that contract management.
So what we're expecting from the CUDs is a document that's been updated, a document that addresses these issues, and we encourage the CUDs to get that information as soon as possible. Like, we can start reviewing the business plan in advance. Encourage you to submit it with your eligibility screening, the pre-application, or even further in advance from that. We did get one business plan that we used this checklist on, and we've sent back a few questions. In general, it was close to what we needed and what we wanted, and we're waiting for a revision. So we're thinking most of the CUDs, if they're working with good consultants, are there, minus possibly addressing some of these other risks. So I wanted to see if there's clarifying questions from the board, thoughts from the board, and we can expand it beyond then if we wanted to, but let's start there.
Okay, I just want to comment, I like the addition of the housekeeping criteria, and that is to capture how subcontractors are going to be managed in the field, so we prevent another, farm situation where the spool of wire is caught up in hay and kills all the cows. That's super important, and really, that needs to be stressed strongly given some of the issues that have happened in the state. So that's a good add. Thank you. Holly.
So I'm just thinking about this idea of a living business plan. And here's my question for everybody. As we come forward into a construction grant, don't we want the business plan to stop morphing so that we have viable direction on what we're trying to do? I'm a little concerned that we could be granting based on a set of assumptions, a set of commercial assumptions that are just out of sync with the grant by the time it gets implemented. And we've sort of authorized that by saying, oh, it's a living business plan. Are we putting grant conditions in that require staff to review modifications to the business plan? Are there periodic modifications to the business plan that are required or that are reviewed? I'm just looking for what our sense of security is there, and whether that couldn't that actually change?
Well, maybe let me clarify first. I think that'll answer it. So by living document, I'm saying, well, assumptions on costs may change. There's things that are going to happen outside of the control of the existing business plan, and every time they submit a new application for funding, they're going to have to update it based on new assumptions and new changes and the progress that they've made to date. So it's not saying that, oh, you're going to come back with, okay, we're doing all the underserved. Okay, we're going to come back for the next one. Oh, we're only doing served addresses that are already served. I'm not saying living in terms of a wholesale revision. I'm saying that just as we needed the plan updated this time from the original plan produced via the Broadband Innovation Grant, we're going to expect that next time as well, and we understand that.
Yeah, let me add some clarification too, because since this is a phased approach, we're essentially saying we'll fund up to 24 months for a construction program. It's likely that 21 months later, they'll come in for another application. We want to know that if there's market conditions and changes have occurred, that they've addressed those in terms of their revised application. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but I think we better stop using the phrase living business plan. I think we should say that you want a revised business plan with each grant application, and that you want them to certify that it's accurate to the best of their understanding and belief.
Interesting. What do you think of that, Rob?
I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's what our intention is, and that clarifies it. So.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? Questions? Christine, do we need a motion to approve this checklist, or?
No, I don't think we don't need a motion, do we, Rob?
I don't think so. This was just trying to let you in and let the CUDs of how we were thinking of evaluating things, and we're likely to do the same type of thing for other aspects of the grant. This might be a good time to just give a little bit of an overview of the process for approving the grants now that we have our first one in. I don't have a flow chart today, and there's still some things we're figuring out, but the basic process is that if you get your agreement in, if you get your proposal in within 10 days of the next board meeting, the board will address it. That doesn't mean the board will necessarily make a decision. In some cases, we might be able to. Within 5 business days of receiving the application, staff will review it, come up with a list of questions. We're immediately forwarding it to all board members. If they have questions, they should send it to staff. We are also sharing it with the consultant that's going to review the business plan and the high-level design, and also come back with questions. At day 6, we will provide the batch of questions to the applicant to respond to. Any responses should be back the Wednesday before the next board meeting so they can be included in the board packet that goes out Wednesday or Thursday, and they will be expected to present at the next board meeting and be available for questions and answers. They can bring whomever they seem fit to answer questions. At that board meeting, the board might have additional questions. There might be things that they can't make a decision, or they could decide to approve it. Our goal is we want things approved within 2 board meetings. That's the goal. And we'll spell this out in a document. We're waiting for some feedback from our consultants on the turnaround for the full review to make sure it aligns. But it's a lift. Ideally, these are going to come in stages. Like we just have 1 application now. If the CDs, and everybody should know, if we end up with 5 applications showing up at the same time, we're not gonna. We're only human. But that's what the goal is.
Okay, excellent. Any questions, comments? Okay, good work. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make sure we did have on the agenda that there was going to be, there's no motion that we need for this. Just
No motion needed. No, this is
just an understanding.
Information. Yep.
Okay, so are we all done with the construction grant review?
Yep.
Holly?
I had an assumption that I've been thinking about that has to do with the business plan checklist. And my assumption under market analysis is that you're not asking people to go out and commission a market analysis, but rather to, I mean, I don't know what, other than the take rate and who's present in the market and whether you're serving under or unserved addresses. Can you expand, Rob, on what your expectations for a market analysis is?
Yeah, I think that's it. I don't think we're looking for anything more than that. Yeah.
You're not looking for somebody to go out and commission a study.
No, most of it's like they had to do it as it was one of the requirements for the business plan. So their consultants looked at it and performed a market analysis. If the business plan was accepted, we're gonna look at those assumptions, look at what was said there. If something's blatantly missing, we're gonna call it out. But yes.
But when you say market analysis, Rob, what do you mean?
I mean, looking at the area they want to serve and what the potential is to serve that area. As you said, who are the competitors? Is the big
what
thing.
Are they charging?
What are they charging? What has changed since they did the business plan in the first place? If one of the CDs has a business plan and then a company came in and built out 50% of their district with fiber, well, it's going to change their market assumption a little bit.
I just think it's valuable to have that conversation out loud. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, I think we are all set on item 5, construction grant review. Rob, do you have anything else?
No, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And
we'll be sending you the first application as soon as possible.
Excellent. Okay, that moves us on to staff updates. Christine?
Yep, I'll have Stan provide you the details, but the piece of legislation that seems to be continued to get discussed is called H-166, or the cow bill. So Stan, go ahead and take that away.
We were following this. There was a hearing earlier in the week, and of a Senate Finance, and they are looking into other options at this point. They did not make it. They did not take a vote on it, and they're considering possibly talking to the insurance department to see if some work can be done there. So unclear what, if anything, will happen with 166.
Yep. And we're not aware of anything else. Did we miss anything, Laura?
Christina, we heard anything back on the changes to Act 71 that we're gonna?
No, we haven't.
But
I'll make sure I remind Ann I'm sorry, is it Representative Cunningham or Senator Cunningham? But anyway, I'll make sure she includes that in the miscellaneous tax bill that's going over for crossover.
Okay. That bill is pretty close. The miscellaneous tax,
Okay, I'll
like
call her
today,
today.
be a good time to call her.
Call her as soon as this meeting's over, or if we take a break.
Okay, moving right along so we can get you to make that phone call. Grants.
Go ahead, Rob. Yep.
Yeah, grants. We did receive a full application from Maple Broadband. We will begin to review that. We're also just fielding some questions from other entities, but there's been no other pre-applications submitted at this time.
Yeah, and I would encourage, as a business plan, I would encourage the other CUDs to take a look at the business plan that was submitted by Northwest to get some ideas. We think overall the assumptions were pretty solid in that business plan. We did have some additional questions, but overall.
It's on their website, but we also encourage you to submit your business plan sooner than later so we can start the review process.
Okay, how about contracts?
Contracts. Stan, you want to talk about the, what? Go ahead, Rob, sorry.
I'll say Alyssa has the contract, and then I think we're going to discuss the other contracts that haven't been enacted yet in executive session.
Okay. Do you want to do that now or later?
When it's on the agenda, probably. But Alyssa, if you want to go forward.
Yeah, I don't think we have too many updates. I think we already covered it in a past board meeting, but we are working with CTC for the fiber optics engineer. We had our kickoff meeting last week, so they're ready and waiting, and we're setting up all the process for how we can share all of our documentation back and forth between us and the consultants and the board, and also working with the GIS consultants for similar process for sharing the GIS information. So all of the CUDs have been given licenses to use Esri, and our consultants are providing some services to the CUDs to help just get them set up and ready to go, so that we can review their information on our platform.
The GIS consultants also produced a map showing all the eligible locations and are working on an atlas that layers a lot of information on top of that, both for us and for the CUDs and the public. But I think that's it for contract.
Okay. Background music. Okay, let's go on to legal.
There's an introduction, Stan, for musical entourage. Is that?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any legal updates versus we've already touched on a lot of things you've been looking into this.
Yeah, no, there's nothing out that we have received several applications for our legal regulatory RFP. We'll be reviewing those. But there is nothing else in the pipeline.
Okay.
Okay, Laura, then Holly.
Yeah, Patty, I apologize. This may be out of order, but under this topic, thinking about legal, I'm wondering if we could, in a meeting, upcoming meeting soon, maybe hear from some national experts who are looking at the issues of privacy, some public entities. There's a few that come to mind. Electronic Frontier Foundation is one, and others. I think it would just be helpful for us, and maybe even it's a set aside to hear and the CUDs to kind of hear about the work and the policy discussions that are happening at the national level, since Vermont is really leading in a lot of ways related to community broadband. So just, I guess that's a request under legal or that type of, for an upcoming meeting.
Okay, good suggestion. Thank you very much. Holly, you have your hand up?
I do. Stan, in the minutes for this meeting, there are a number of legal initiatives, and I just hope that you'll go back to those minutes and make sure that those items are either in the parking lot or have checked the box. So going forward, it'd be really useful to me for you to address those things in your report so that we know, oh yes, they got on your list. So
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Will do.
Okay, anything else for staff updates, Christine?
No, nothing else.
Okay. We're going to close this item out and we're going to go to the revised or the additional item on the agenda, which is update of budgets and how often we should do that, what's the protocol, and whether we do that monthly. I wouldn't do that every meeting because we're meeting every 2 weeks and that would be overkill. Monthly at the most, maybe every other month. Put that out there as a question.
Yeah, Patty, if I might.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, I would be interested in nothing less than quarterly. You know, and with state accounting, I'm not sure how that, if the staff has any recommendations on the best means of kind of giving us timely information.
Yeah, I think quarterly is obviously very doable. You know, I've been working back and forth with the Public Service Department on getting a format. We've got that down. I mean, I'll continue to get monthly reports and continue to work with the DPS because you know, it's good to make sure there aren't any holes or things haven't been allocated in the right place. But quarterly is very doable.
Does anybody on the board want to see more frequently than quarterly?
I have another question, Patty. So I'm sure the answer is, it will be attractive to micromanage. But is there some reason that we would not look at kind of monthly financials if you're getting them, Christine, that those would not be just kind of copied to us and it's an agenda item quarterly?
Yeah, that's fine. That works. Like I say, I'm going to be looking at it anyway.
And happy to hear, you know, kind of a really, you know, kind of a more baked proposal from staff at the next meeting.
That is the plan. My plan is to come to the next meeting with a recommendation for the budget for next year, as well as what the budget reporting will look like.
And
Okay.
in addition to budget reporting, kind of overall where we're at.
Yep.
Okay, Holly.
I appreciate that you're going to have a proposal for us at the next meeting, Christine. So thank you for that. I'm reflecting Representative Sebella's concerns about the reporting more as a schedule issue, because if we only do quarterly, that means we're going to come around to a timeline when there's kind of two big milestones for us. One is, you know, when the budget is approved by the legislature and the governor, and then there's the other aspect of when we approve a budget. And so when you're making your plan, would you highlight those two milestones and how you synchronize with them so that we don't have the misfortune of approving a quarterly finances after the legislature's already voted for a budget?
Yes, that's a very good suggestion.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
You're up.
Just, I guess, a question for Christine around the additional appropriations this year, and if those, if things are on track, if there are any outstanding items or issues of concern related to expected appropriations.
It seems like we've been well received. I don't see any indication that anything is going to change. My understanding is we're going to get 95 million allocated for this year. So I'm not, in fact, I'm a little nervous because it's been remarkably smooth.
Yeah. Okay. It may be appropriate to be nervous. So who are you having those conversations with? I don't need to. Are you having those conversations with the chairs of the relevant committees?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none, let's go to item 7, the CUDA update. We'll hear from Will.
Hello, thank you again, Patty. I did touch on some of the issues pertaining to the materials proposal during the main part of the discussion, so I'll deal with some other issues first. Kind of tracking backwards here with regard to the GIS that Alyssa touched upon. It's true, the CUDs have each received their licenses for 1 year of Esri ArcGIS service. That actually is just for now for 7 of the CUDs that have coincidentally have received pre-construction. As Otter Creek and Southern Vermont, we're not able to designate a GIS specialist yet, but those licenses will be ready to go at the right time. There are some issues around the rollout of the technology, mostly because I don't have the expertise to really instruct everyone exactly how to get rolling, but we are going to have a initial setup meeting on Wednesday with Stone Environmental to try to get online, and then most likely, assuming we won't be able to get to it in that meeting, a subsequent training in order to get aligned to the state broadband atlas. So I'm hoping that we'll be mostly online with that by Wednesday, and then hopefully by the end of next week, everyone will be, much more well versed in how to use that and be connected to the state's online statewide broadband atlas. And I have really high hopes for that program in terms of especially how we can be public facing in terms of showing the residents of our districts our progress, and also as a tool for internally for state and other government bodies to observe what we're doing and how our grants are being enacted. So I think that's a really exciting development. So for those of you in the CUDs, we are setting that up for Wednesday. Please stay tuned for the time for that. With a note on the business plan, thank you for approaching this issue. The vital need here was clarity. We definitely needed greater insights on exactly what needed to be in the business plan in order to carry that out. And I'm glad to hear that Northwest was successful in having that approved. The one area in which I was especially concerned was the idea of the market analysis. And I think that Christine's response to the question about that was pretty satisfactory for from the CUD perspective, just because that particular element could become quite costly, when it comes to commissioning that kind of market analysis. So the more broad strokes that could be used in that, especially, I think would be good for the CUD. So thank you for taking the time to clarify some points on that, and I think that'll be very helpful to the CUDs going forward as they establish and update their business plans. With the caveat that I assume there will be many questions from the CUDs about specific elements of exactly how much detail will be needed, given the living nature of these documents and the CUD businesses. And that there will be need for amendment to those as they come in, and I just would urge patience for the VCBB on that. So moving on, a couple of other updates. Since the last time I gave an update to the VCBB, we did receive notice of some delays from our fiber supplier. And we held a meeting with VCB staff and CUD leaders to evaluate exactly what those delays would look like for the 2022 construction season. And also, brought a number of other factors into play as well. And I thought that the board might be interested in a summary of, our perspective on the upcoming construction season, which is generally pretty positive. We don't believe that the delays to our materials as they stand will have a very significant impact on 2022. This is because most CUDs are now aiming for a goal of building 200 miles of fiber this year, which is in line with how EC Fiber has consistently built in each of its seasons of construction. The real concern that is raised by this idea is that this sort of fiber construction has not been carried out in the state of Vermont before in a single construction season. This will be an unprecedented build in a given amount of time, and the problem that leads to is labor. For the time being, as CUDs have yet to really begin to contract for labor, we are still having some difficulty determining exactly what the labor deficit will be. However, with the training programs in place and pursuing other avenues to bring in additional labor to the state, I think that we're being reasonably proactive about this, and would just urge the VCBB to keep this in mind as one of the major threats to our construction season. We very well may need your influence to secure assistance to this problem where we are otherwise unable to do so. So that is definitely an issue on the horizon. As of yet, we're kind of unable to sound a true alarm. But luckily, the plans for the CUDs as they stand, with the materials arrival as they stand, looks like the construction season will proceed according to plan. I would like to note one other thing about those delays is that in light of the fact that one set of delays could imply that more could be on the horizon, I've started to explore stopgap solutions for our fiber supply. Due to the lead times of almost every supplier, the only ones that I've been able to get a promising lead time on that would arrive in a way that would shore up our supply for 2022 are manufactured outside of the United States. None are impacted by the restrictions on Russian and Chinese providers. However, I do think that we may face a critical moment of following through with Guidehouse's recommendations for using imported materials should we face additional delays. I'm going to continue to explore that stopgap purchase, as well as future purchases likely of domestic fiber for 2023, as the lead times for that, as I've mentioned before, now place us in a position where we will need to be purchasing that fiber relatively soon. And of course, we are working with Krista and NEK to secure our purchase of hardware, now exploring another quote for a consortium deal from another company as well. So we're hoping to get those options soon and follow through with our pre-purchase of assorted hardware as soon as we can. Other updates. I'm not sure how many of you have seen the press release from Northwest and Lamoille. They have reached a very interesting agreement with Google Fiber. This is now public. It's been in the works for quite a while. And I would just like to note that the CUD Association is in full support of these two districts. As far as I know, all or almost all of the CUDs interacted with this company and explored what they had to offer. Not all of them decided to go with them, but we're glad that these two have, and think that it's a really promising arrangement. So just wanted to reassure the board that statewide, the CUD Association is behind these two CUDs as they move forward with this really innovative arrangement.
Hey, well, I'm going to interrupt you really quick just to say they're in advanced negotiations. They don't have a final formal agreement yet. Just they yell at me every time I say that, so I want to make sure that's clear to everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I should have raised that distinction as well. Certainly the negotiations are at advanced stage enough that the two districts were ready to make this public, which is the only reason why I've brought it up today. And I would also probably direct any questions about that to the heads of those CUDs, as they have the full details on that and should be taking the credit for it as well. I'd like to touch lastly, of course, I'll be open to questions, but I'd like to touch briefly on affordability, which is something that I usually don't do, as our mantra here at the association is that affordability is derived from availability, and that the focus should be on reducing the cost of availability. But at our last VCUDA meeting, we did have a presentation from Holly on the progress of equal access to broadband. And the CUDs have come to a consensus that equal access to broadband as an organization should be promoted, especially in terms of its funding and capacity, in order to be the facilitator of essentially the facilitator of affordable broadband programs in Vermont. So we've yet to take any really decisive action to try to make that happen, but I would just like to raise that to the VCBB as perhaps something that it could be working on in order to advance the capacity of equal access to broadband. It did appear from Holly's presentation that capacity and funding were kind of the key turning points right now for being able to really make a EAB what the CUDs think that it should be for our states, and that it really is a vital area for us. The CUDs, our expertise is on availability. We do not, frankly, have strong outreach programs for affordability yet. And if the VCBB were to champion equal access to broadband, it would be an enormous boon to us, essentially. So I would like to just to take the time to promote that on behalf of the CUDs, as we did at our last meeting. And with that, I'd be happy to take some questions and to yield the rest of my time.
Okay, Christine, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to weigh in on equal access for broadband. It's over the past month, I've reached out to just about every organization that people could think of in the state in terms of how to deal with equity and affordability. And this ties to a meeting of the NTIA 2 weeks ago down in Washington, where they made strong recommendations that the governor needs to assign an agency in the state to address equity and affordability issues as part of the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Act. There's something like $2.44 billion available for the states to do this work. In my work with many of the agencies across the state, I will say equal access for broadband has looked at all the comprehensive issues more than anybody else, and has, although there's a lot of pilots that were done in the states, equal access for broadband has more time, more experience, and a more comprehensive view. So what I would recommend, and I'm prepared to bring something into the next board meeting, is that we recommend to the governor that the VCBB be the agency to address digital inequity issues, and that we contract with EAB to do that for the state. I do think that's the best answer, and I can support that with my report. But again, the NTIA recommended that the digital offices be the location for equity and affordability issues. And then I'm saying, since equal access for broadband has already done a lot of work in this area, this is their focus, that we would ultimately contract with them. Now, there may be logistics involved, RFPs and others that need to be done properly, but this is which we will follow all the state procurement processes for doing that. So I throw that out, not for approval, just for comment.
Okay, any other comments from board members? Will, did you have one more point to make?
Yes, I briefly forgot to mention one other point that I know the VCBB was at least tangentially interested in. Vicuda is also now exploring, I'm actively working on developing shared services for bond counsel and municipal advisory. There's some debate over, the urgency of these, but given that some CUDs are very interested in receiving these services, in a short time frame, I'm hoping to have those online, so to speak, as soon as possible. So we have a couple of great avenues on both the bond counsel and municipal advisory, and hopefully be able to provide those resources quite soon to the CUDs.
Great, thank you. Okay, if there's any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Laura?
Okay.
Yeah, Laura?
So, Will, great update. Question for you and Christine or Rob. When we're talking about putting shared resources, developing a shared resource, either at VCUDA or at VCBB, how are we making decisions or communicating about where those shared resources best live?
Great question, Laura. Rob Fish and I have been having a dialogue about this for the past, Rob, 2 or 3 weeks. My strategy has largely been just to proceed with having a Vicuda develop these services. The model that we've got for our accounting and auditing services, which yet to elect a vendor for that, but for either. But the idea is that CUDs will be using these services as needed. So provided they would like to use our retainer contract with a vendor, they would seek an amendment on their pre-construction or construction grants and then transfer that funding to us. That does seem to be an effective model to me. However, myself and our board are very open to other services provided directly by the VCBB, as well as other mechanisms for funding services that the association could provide. I'd also like to note that Rob and I have discussed a couple of other creative solutions, including a master service contract between the VCBB and the CUD Association. But we've yet to, I'll turn it over to Rob, but we've yet to really set anything into motion in that regard. So I've been proceeding along the same avenue that I have since starting here.
Sure. Let me back up for 1 second here on it depends on where the funding is coming from. We have some funding from H315 that requires the VCBB to contract for the service. For other shared services, we have been tossing around the idea of doing an RFP for another organization to hold a master contract to provide some flexibility, to have it where let's this way, we've run into some challenges when it comes to some of the legal stuff of like, oh, well, who is the attorney-client privilege between? And that we're likely to have those same issues again when it comes to other shared services. And it may be easier for us to subcontract that to whether it's VCUDA or another organization replies to an RFP to be able to take on that type of contracting on behalf of the CUDs. I don't know if I made that any clearer. Sorry.
No, that's helpful, and I'm really happy to hear that those conversations are ongoing. I actually think they're pretty important conversations as the CUDs continue to develop, because they'll have some long-lasting implications. I think the VCBB has some accountability requirements, and I think VCUDA has some advocacy opportunities, and so I think it would be really important. And Patty, I'm not sure how to best structure this, but I actually would love to hear something a little bit more kind of formalized. I don't know if it's formalized. We certainly don't control VCUDA, but just in thinking with the staff about the appropriateness of what types. where we see opportunity for delegating or appropriating resources to VCUTA to kind of aggregate need, and where we think we should not do that, where we need to kind of retain. It's not something actually that I have given. I'm just thinking about it now, actually, and just wondering what is the, what are the appropriate roles there. So I don't know if that's something we could ask to have maybe a recommendation come back from staff, or if that's something that requires a little more board discussion. Just gonna leave it there. Holly, you're muted.
It's a good question. I think there's several topics in there that would all unravel differently. So I think you'd have to have a legal discussion differently than financial audit services. I think each expertise would have a different answer to that. Christine, what are your thoughts about taking a look at that and giving some thoughts at an upcoming meeting?
Yeah, I think we've certainly discussed it quite a bit. So I think it would make sense to put a formal proposal at the next meeting.
All right. Holly, you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking out loud that I'm following along with Laura's process point and thinking that maybe we have a checklist of what we have as shared services available so that we can report on it, where the funding from the services comes so we know who the owner is, and where it lives for administration purposes, and some rationale around that. And then if we had that framework, we could apply it to a number of different shared activities. So thanks, Laura.
So there's one other question that comes into play if we are moving towards that model, and we've danced around it a lot, but it's of whether we can issue a grant to VCUTA or whether we need to do a whole contracting process of whether it's and that's a question that I don't at least have clarity on.
Yeah. Patty, I mean, I feel like, and maybe I'm the only person who feels like it, like we might have a moment here to like catch our breath, and maybe have a little bit more intentionality about what we're doing, and VCUTA, which is such a critical aspect to, the work that is happening here. How do we articulate kind of the partnership, or not even the partnership relationship between VCUTA and VCBB optimally, so that we're getting the job done and we have accountability, and there remains a proper amount of tension. So
I would although I will reaffirm the fact that the association's member CUDs are open into a wide variety of opportunities that will, win these shared services. We also intend to be a sustainable organization, once the grant funding of the VCBB is no longer flowing. So I would just also, and just another thing to keep in mind with this very interesting debate is that we would like the model to be sustainable when the CUDs are paying their dues and paying their fees to us when that is not coming from grant funding as well. So a service provided directly from the VCBB may not have that the same sustainability. Yeah. But again, it's just another consideration.
Patty, if I might.
Yep.
Yeah, if I might, I mean, I wonder if it would be interesting to hear, it would be interesting, I'm sure, to hear from VCUTA themselves about, kind of their long-term, how they view themselves long-term, and, what role they see themselves playing, and how we can support that or augment it. I'm not trying to create, bureaucracy or challenges here, but just really trying to make sure that we're fine tuning and being intentional, and that we understand the CUDs Association also, and are able to provide you all with it. So to Rob's point, is it grant funding or some other resource appropriate? Is that something that we should be working to do?
So let's add this for an upcoming meeting.
Yep, got it.
Interesting. All right, anything else?
Patty, could you be clear what the this is? Are we asking for Bicuda to give us a long-range plan or a strategic plan? Or are we looking for a way to document our relationships?
So yeah, what I heard is similar to what Will just said, what the long-term vision is of Bicuda, and also of what VCBB would be offering in terms of services and what that looks like. And which services do we see, legal, auditing, like list down the services of what we see as what we're doing, and just put some boundaries and guardrails around them. Are these long-term? Are these short-term? Metamorphosize over to Bicuda. Just put some flesh on the bones for each of the services that come through VCBB, and then also just talk about Bicuda's long-term plans.
Understood.
Okay, anything else in this space? Okay, let's move on to our next agenda item is public input. Rob, do you want to run that show?
Sure. We got a few questions, or one question here. FX, you're up.
Hey, okay, thank you. So, I've testified on 2 occasions now about S-166, and I've been surprised to discover that a lot of the information that I had to share was not at all well known or understood. And I think that this item at the bottom of the checklist, is reflective of the same misunderstanding of the situation. I want to make it very clear that the contract that EC Fiber has with ValleyNet and the contract that EC Fiber and ValleyNet together have with Eustis has had and will have provisions that are far stronger than what's in 166. And they were all in place when Eustis subcontracted to Fibergenesis to work those few miles of easement poles through Tunbridge. Now, I might fault Eustis's management of the subcontractor, or fault their follow-up out in the field. But if you think that it would have been possible for me as chair of the board or any other board member to go out there and do that inspection, or to demand from Eustis proof that they were operating their business properly, or to ask ValleyNet to do that, or expect that anybody would be able to do that, given that the contract puts the entire responsibility on one of the contractual parties, I think is mistaken. And I'm very concerned that because of this misapprehension that somehow or other nobody was thinking about the need to clean up, or somehow or other nobody was thinking about the need to make sure that subcontractors had insurance, that this happened. That's not why it happened. That the subcontractor did have insurance. The subcontractor's insurance company has denied the claim in part because the subcontractor has not cooperated with their investigation. Also because they terminated the insurance for non-payment one day prior to the subcontractor finishing work, and therefore they say the insurance was over on that date, and the damage to the cows didn't happen until they ate the wire, which was months and months later. So they've never said we're not covering this because it wasn't insured. They've never even looked at what the Hoyts actually claimed. You know, I think I can state with some certainty that this event has opened eyes, and that everybody in the business of working easement poles in the state of Vermont, you know, now has a very strong recognition of the necessity of additional monitoring. But beyond the language that's already in our contract that insists that the work is cleaned up everywhere, whether it's easement work or roadside work. I'm really concerned that anybody on this board or anybody in the state legislature thinks that the municipalities, districts are going to be able to.
You got to wrap it up. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other public comments? I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment. Okay. I guess if the board wants to respond to any public comments, if not, we can. Really, no other public comments? Come on, people.
Hey,
we can close public comment.
We'll take that as a vote of confidence.
We do have an executive session, I presume.
Yes.
So let's keep moving along so we can try to get out of here by 4. I have a hard stop at 4 today.
Sure.
Okay, we should be able to get you out by 4.
Okay.
Good goal.
Probably sooner.
Okay, so let's move on to parking lot. Thank you, FX, for those comments. Parking lot.
Yep, I will share my screen and we'll take it from there. Okay, can you see the parking lot in front of you now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There it is.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, so we've got 4 open items here. We provided you the benchmarks, so that one closed. That's in your board packet. If there are any questions on that, certainly I can take them, but I think we got that one.
This is Patty jumping in. I thought thank you for that material, but for me, it didn't answer some of the more fundamental questions of kind of more, you know, there's one data point about price per revenue or expense per revenue. To me, that's the stuff that I'm looking for versus, you know, how much you're spending on email, commercials, website, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was 10%. Essentially, it runs about 10% across the board. You'll see that the third graphic shows you that information. Provided the other information, since I was doing the research for the CUD's information, but the number is about 10% of revenue. So, as a benchmark, you know, we can look at that and ensure that, you know, as part of our review of the business plan, that falls within you know, within that range. Now understand that in the case of Maple, they were doing their agreement had them doing the marketing themselves. But if the contractor takes on the marketing, the partner takes on the marketing, then of course that budget item flows through, and we'll be looking at with that benchmark in mind.
Yeah, I would just ask you, I'm not asking you to answer it right now, but if you could go back to that item and look at it from informational purposes to this board versus, you know, some generic survey that was done for other states. I'm just trying to get
Well,
a
I
better
don't know how
sense.
I don't know how else you would do that other than look at the individual business plan with that benchmark in mind. You know, there's significant research done on the national level, and you know, I'm not sure we have the same resources at the state level to do that kind of a study of what state telecom companies are doing. But if that's a request,
So
we would
I'm
probably.
thinking, so we don't need to chew up a ton of time here. We can talk offline, Christine, but I'm thinking there's been a number of co-ops in the Northeast who have done broadband recently. And I'm just curious what their experience would be, like some more boots on the ground stuff. I just found the survey data not to be super helpful personally.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the rest of the board what your thoughts are on this, because it seems unfortunately, it's hard for me to do things lightly.
Yeah.
This may just be my issue
No,
and others
no.
not.
No, I'm with you, Patty.
All right. So it didn't, yeah.
I feel like that data, Christine, is helpful in kind of a long-term, kind of in a longer-term strategic planning sense, as opposed to kind of a comparison, you know, having an industry standard or you know, a sense of what other types of entities are.
But with that revised thing, I think I'm going to have to push that out at least a month, if not more, because I'm not sure where I find that information or how I find that information. But I will come back with details around specifically what you're asking for is specifically what do the cooperatives spend? Be clear with what you're asking here.
Yeah, Christine, let's you and I have a little side chat on this issue so that I don't send you on a wild goose chase.
Okay. Yeah. So I've.
You and I will follow up. Laura,
I'm going to close this one and open up a new one.
Okay, Laura has her hand up, and so too does Holly.
Yeah. So I would be interested in, for instance, you know, what other kind of public utility entities are using for marketing budgets, as opposed to, you know, Comcast, maybe, you know, WEC, you know.
Yeah, except understand, public utilities are regulated, so you can't. I would not advise you to use electric utilities as benchmarks.
But not all of us are regulated like we are in Vermont. There's co-ops in the Northeast, and thinking specifically New York, that are really good representatives that have deployed broadband and Fresh Start, brand new service area. And I'm just curious what their spend on marketing dollars would be.
Okay, so what you're asking for are specifically what cooperatives are spending.
But I use that as an example.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether other examples there are, so please give me some other examples.
I think we can follow up offline rather than chew up a bunch of time, Christine.
Well,
Okay,
actually, I'd like to comment on this issue.
Go ahead, Holly.
So when you're talking about a monopoly utility, its need for marketing is different than a new service being introduced to a new market. And so the nuance of what the business agenda should be for marketing, it is different for these organizations. So I'm a little concerned about how we draw parallels here. And I'm worried that we find, I think to Christine's point, and I appreciate that to have a benchmark of some sort would be helpful. But I do think we have to be really careful that we pick a benchmark that's appropriate to our circumstances, which are not like utility.
So Holly, I'm thinking of specifically a utility that's competing in the internet space. So even though they're an electric utility, they're competing with other folks in broadband.
So they have an existing presence and they're adding a service.
Yes.
That is different in my book, but I think being really mindful of the distinctions and the comparison parameters is just critical if we're going to use this as a judgment benchmark for funding.
Mm-hmm. Understood. I get your point. Okay, go ahead, Christine.
Okay, I'll,
Do your list. The parking lot list, are you done or
Yep. no, not done. Can you see the list now?
not yet?
Christine, you unshared your screen before when it was still being shared, and now you need to share it again, I guess.
Yeah, I'm trying to share it again. It's not letting me share it again. I don't know why the hell it's doing that. Hang on, let me try. It says, okay, there we go. Okay, so we talked about marketing. Material default, Stan's still working on that. Stan, I said you'll provide an update at 3:14. Does that but you know, I'm sorry, we're going to revise that date. So Stan, when do you think you can provide that next update?
Yeah, I think at the next meeting, I'll be in a position to share it. I just got some information today from the AG's office, so and from the Buildings and Grounds Department.
Okay, great. And then we still owe you how we're going to show progress, and that's ongoing work we're doing with our GIS folks. Anything else that should be on here?
I think that's a good list. Thank you very much, Christine.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Stop sharing
Next
that.
item on the agenda is agenda items for the next meeting.
So I'll tell you what I collected so far for agenda items. We're going to present the budget and a proposed reporting schedule and reporting methodology. We're going to come back to the shared services proposal, both long-term for the VCBB as well as the short-term for shared services with, I'd say long-term for the CUD, along with short-term shared services with the VCBB. I'm going to come in with an equity and affordability proposal, and we're likely to have a Maple broadband construction grant to approve. What else should be on that list?
I'd like to hear from Electronic Frontier Foundation or some other national privacy advocacy organization, or at least have a report on when we could do that.
Okay.
So it looks like we have
Anything
quite a few items already.
Yeah, that'll keep us busy.
Okay, anything else for agenda items for next meeting? Okay, let's go on to executive session. So we do have an executive session item, I understand.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
All right, I move that we go into executive session as premature disclosure will clearly place VCBB at a substantial disadvantage. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Ayes carry. We will move to executive session. So Christine, we're going to come out, we're going to leave this meeting and come into the other link that Rob sent, correct?
That's correct. You should have an
Correct.
executive session. Yep.
Okay.
Sure. Does anyone need a 5-minute break first? It should be a fairly quick executive session. Nope. Keep going. Okay, let's keep going then. See you all there.
Okay. Bye, everybody.